We are going to start now. I'm going to present myself. I am José Manuel. I'm going to be your moderator for this session. I am a solutions engineer here at Strayos. And before we start, I would just like to go with some few housekeeping items. So the first one is this session is going to be recorded, and we are going to share with you the link after the finishing of this session. If you are facing any sort of audio problems, please check the chat. I'm going to upload now a dial-in file that is available in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. So if you are facing any sort of audio problems, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A section. I know that you're not able to use the chat. Just let us know if you are having any sort of problem with the audio, because if you are answering, probably you are not having this problem. That's nice. But if you're facing any sort of problems, please let us know. We are going to try to sort of upload somehow. So if you have any questions during the session, please upload this in the Q&A session. We are going to save this for the end, and if eventually we just run out of time, we're going to get in touch with you directly. And just to finish, we're going to run some live polls during this webinar, so we're looking forward to have your feedback on this as well. Again, thank you for joining us today. Presenting, we are going to have James Kenny. It's a Vice President of Revenue Operations here at Strayos, and he has around 15 years of experience in the mining industry. Hi, James. Thank you for joining us, and I'll hand over the webinar to you to start.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jose. I really appreciate the introduction and being the master of ceremonies here for everything and keeping us all organized. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. And we're going to be visiting about stop to drawing polygons and start to use some of the automated stockpile tracking with our new Segmentation AI tool. We're going to kind of go through a couple different items here. We're going to hit high-level reviews, tips and tricks, getting started in Strayos, and a few other items leading up to that. So let's go ahead and do the dive. So when it comes to doing stockpile work, things of that, doing your inventory control, basic mapping, right? You need to make sure you have the tools for the job. That's going to be your platform. Those can be a variety of different things. That's basically what your sensor is mounted on. That can be a drone, a vehicle, tripod, handheld SLAM, and even aircraft. So sensors, what we're going to focus on here primarily today is the camera, so doing photogrammetry, and then also LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging. Also too, survey control is also important. That can be your GPS system, whether you're running PPK or RTK. And then you can also use total station. Highly recommend having GCPs and CPs as well. So that'd be ground control points and checkpoints. So what's the best way to start to set some of these up to make sure we're utilizing GCPs or checkpoints? We want a even distribution across our area of interest that we're capturing our data. Over on the left-hand side, you see that big red X with 2 arrows on it. Well, the problems that we have there with GCP2, we probably need a little bit more overlap on that. I usually recommend whatever your boundaries are, make sure you're overflying that by maybe roughly about 10%. And also too, if you have those targets, you want to make sure you at least have one leg that's being captured on that with data and photogrammetry. Our other arrow that's pointing in the center is you do want to have at least a target in the center. It's good for better control, different elevations. And all I ask is that you please, please, please do not keep all your targets on the same elevation in a straight line. That's a rough one, and I see it out there. I put some recommended flights on here. Some of these are probably a little bit on higher level of safety, but they should be bulletproof. That's why I put them in there. Photogrammetry, overlap and side lap of about 75. Try to maintain a GSD of about 2 centimeters if possible. LiDAR is a little bit different on its overlap that you're looking at there if you're utilizing that on a UAV. So about 60 forward, 40 side does pretty well. And for both of them, if you have a UAV that has the capability of doing terrain following, that's always nice because especially if you have inventory that's in pit areas or operations, you'll have major elevation changes that happen to you. Just make sure you keep an eye on that it's not pulling from an older Google Earth file and trying to determine what the elevation is, just make sure it'll actually either do live terrain following or you've maybe uploaded a older surface to it that's pretty recent. And then we talked about doing the design work. I like to bring in KMLs from Google Earth, and then I can verify what I'm actually looking at in the field. Mine sites are notorious for change, so we want to make sure that we're actually capturing the areas that we need, either coordinate-wise or visual-wise for what we're looking at. And I always recommend, if I'm a consultant receiving that data, I usually like to add a little bit of a buffer of an additional about 10% bump out on my areas. Talking about some of our survey control. Everybody kind of stands on different areas with this. This is kind of my own rules with them that I like. And by no means am I saying RTK is bad. I am talking about this being kind of our risk level from lowest to highest on our accuracy and data variability. Probably the safest, in my opinion, is having GCPs and utilizing PPK. So that's going to be pulling the satellite information, you're doing post-processing, correcting, you have targets on the ground. Next would be GCPs and RTK, then GCPs, PPK, and RTK. The reason I put RTK as one of the higher ones is because if you do have a poor RTK signal or you lose signal and you don't have any GCPs or any kind of secondary survey method, a lot of times you're going to have to go refly it. Now, that might not be a big deal if you're at site, you can kind of open the door and fly again. In some cases, though, if you are going from site to site and that's 6 hours backwards the other way, you don't really want to do an extra 12 hours of driving. So it all depends on how that's being run. What I encourage you is if you have GCPs, they'll always be your safety net, whether you need them or not. So all these can be done with good results, and just keep an eye on that. If you don't have something to verify your data accuracy, it's really hard to say what your accuracy really is. So on that note, that'll lead us to our first poll question here.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to share now our first poll question. That's going to be, what is primary survey control method do you currently use for your drone flights? So I have some options in here. So the first one is GCP only, GCP with RTK, PPK, RTK only, GCP with PPK. We don't use survey control yet, or not currently doing drone surveys. So we're going to let around more 15 seconds so everyone can cast their vote. And then I'm going to share the results with everyone. All right. So it looks like around 40% of people voted that they use GCP with RTK. What do you
Nice.
think about this, James?
That's good. That's always nice
Mhm.
to have. I have a good example of why you should be running it that way too. So we'll jump into that. So thank you, Jose.
All right. Mhm.
Okay, so moving along here, when you're going into the Strayos platform, I'm going to go through a little bit of how to get you started, some of the settings that I like to make sure that are ready to make my life easier and make things more productive and kind of aiming for those operational efficiencies. So first off, if you're getting into Strayos, there's two different ways you can start to get started with a new project. So you can have upload your JPEG images. That's going to be utilizing our photogrammetry engine. So that's going to be your raw images going in and GCP information and survey control. Now we can also ingest geospatially referenced LiDAR. So that means it's put into an area. If you've done any filtering or trimming to it, that's where you would want to get started on uploading that pre-processed data. We will touch upon that a little bit later as well. So focusing on the photogrammetry side of the house, when you go to the next screen, it's going to bring you here. This is going to give you quite a bit of different options. It also kind of gives you a first insight into a lot of the different AI functions that are enabled in Strayos. Now, this is kind of the tip of the iceberg on what it is to start to get into it. If you have different GCP data, you can tick that box, upload your CSV file to it. Now, if you are running with RTK, it requires a minimum of 3. If you're not and you're only using GCPs, Strayos does require a minimum of 5. So If you're utilizing PPK, you can tick box on the side there, and you will need an OBS and MRK file that's coming out of your base station. Now, one of the first things you might notice in here too is we have a Stockpile AI. You tick that box, it'll start to auto-detect stockpiles and boundaries as it does the upload and does the processing for you. So then when you get your data engine and look at your project, you're going to have some stockpiles. We'll show you what that looks like as well. Once we've completed all of our information here, we'll click on the next button. And then we start to get into adding our images and looking at our review. So in this case right here, we have our stockpile area, we have our images. We can see that it was used with RTK. We have an RTK flag in there. Now our RTK flag is poor in here. We have it rated at 16. We're looking more for 50 is what we really want to see out of that. So it's good we have those GCPs as well that are uploaded in there. So we can take a look at that. We can upload it, and we can also use our AI to go ahead and review and pull those informations for our tagging of our GCPs. So when we get to our tagging of our GCPs, we can enable that AI verification. Now, I will say you will want to double check this, go through it. It's going to go ahead and tag 3 images per different GCPs that it's able to find and locate. You can edit these, you can change them, go into them. For this example, we're just going to be kind of moving forward just to show the tool. And then once you're done, submit, confirm, and then it'll start doing the processing. Now, when your data engine finishes processing, I highly recommend take a look at the quality report. You can download this. It'll go through a lot of the different information here on some of the error information, give you an idea of what the site looks like, the digital surface model, some of your key point tracking details, camera information. But really what I start to look at is really this overlap. I like to look at it, make sure everything's nice and dark green. It's a good quick check that's in there. Next, I'm going to look at my GCP accuracy if I'm utilizing GCPs. You'll be able to see the information here. This is something that you can dynamically move around as well. I like to then really look at, the first thing I look at is the RMS error. I like to know how bad is bad. And then if I need to hunt down something individually that might be throwing that off, then I can review that. If you've uploaded checkpoints, you can look at the report as well on this. Now, in this case, I just reutilized the same GCPs as my checkpoints, so we're not going to see too many variants in there. But that's going to give you your real kind of accuracy of what you're going to be seeing off of that error overall. So at this point, we'll take another poll question here, and then we'll keep going.
Hello again, everyone. So I'm going to now start our second poll question. That is, how often do you currently measure stockpile volumes? So you have the option daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, only when needed, irregularly, or we don't currently measure stockpile. So again, as we did the other, we're going to leave around 15 seconds so everyone can vote. And then we are going to publish the results. All right, for this specific case, we have the most voted option is monthly.
Yeah, that sounds about right for most
Mm-hmm.
sites. Everybody enjoys the end of month, end of quarter, end of year when that one hits, but certainly end of month is always that peak period for everybody when they're going around and then doing all the true ups, and it's the great race to get all the data in and verify everything. So,
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Jose.
So everyone can see the results now. I'm going to hide them.
So next we'll go over starting to pull that stockpile information from some of the traditional ways, and then we're heading towards our new segmentation AI tool, so that way you have the chance to view that, take a look at it. So here are some of my setting recommendations. First off, when you have your site information, I recommend you go to it and edit your site settings for your volume base setting. So you have your choice of DSM, digital surface model, or digital terrain, along with choosing your base. Now, these are what everything's going to default as. If you're not sure what a DSM or DTM is, don't worry. I have a slide for that coming in just a little bit. This is going to be for whenever I make a stockpile, it's going to default to those settings. Makes it a lot easier compared to if you did 30, 40 different stockpiles and then you find out you got to change all the settings. So I try to choose the one that I use as the most average. That's going to be the DTM, and then usually triangulated is what I like to use. Another thing, when you go into your data engine that's been made in your project, I go down to the inventory dashboard. From here, I go to my material management. If I need to upload a new material, I can do so as a one-off, but usually if I'm getting started with a new site, I like to just upload a large CSV file. So there's a template that you can download there, populate as you need it, upload it, and then all of your material information will be there. Again, these aren't steps that you have to do, but it does make it a little bit easier workflow-wise as you start to get into it. So this is kind of, I guess if you're using a table analogy, this is kind of setting the table, getting ready to start to do our work. Now, I promised you a slide talking about DSMs and DTMs, and there's a few differences too in Strayos on how we look at that and utilize it. So DSM is our digital surface model. The way I usually describe that to people is that's if we kind of took all of our data, we threw a blanket on top of it, and it models it. You can see that in that top right image. We can see that the conveyor stacker is being included in that. And over on the left-hand side in Strayos, it will display it with that kind of jump up like it's going on top of there. And that's okay. That's not a problem because it's going to be based upon what we designate that polygon as when we were putting it in as a DSM or DTM. In our DTM image, you can see on the lower right-hand side, it's knocked out that conveyor for us. So that's why I usually recommend if you're using those different polygons, make sure it's set on that DTM and you're using that, because I have been to sites where they have trees growing out of stockpiles and there could be a dozer pushing on it depending on what kind of material it is. It's going to give you that ability. So once we do our upload, remember we tick that box for our Stockpile AI and that initial upload. Well, we're going to just take a quick look at our site here, get a feel for the terrain. We'll be utilizing this site pretty much throughout this webinar, so you feel comfortable with it. And if we go to our Stockpile and AI detected, we're going to go ahead and turn all of these on. So this is the raw data that comes out of it. I haven't changed anything. I haven't made any updates. So you'll see in some areas it does a good job picking things out. And here it grabbed that, turned it into 1. This stockpile 9 looks good. 8 looks pretty good. But we can start to see some nuances. Now, it's okay. We can make adjustments to these. So I like to call these little kind of points on their nodes. So we can take these nodes, we can adjust them on our polygon, no problem. So this is a great way to get started, is to utilize that Stockpile AI. If we had an extra node or we wanted to remove it, we just hold down the Alt key and left click. Knocks it right out. So nice and easy to make adjustments, but this kind of gives you an idea of what the AI is seeing as stockpiles to start with. Now, in some cases, like on this larger pile of shot rock or riprap that we have, well, that'd be shot rock. It didn't quite grab the whole area. We can make those updates, no problem, but we'll show you some other tools that you can utilize it as well. Everyone's probably made manual polygons. You can still do that in Strayos. There's 2 different ways to go ahead and do that. Now, first off, what I like to do is I like to put it in split screen. I put one of them on my colored Hillshade DTM, so that way I can look at it in 2 different views. So we have our traditional polygon at the top, and then we also then down in the stockpile measurement, we have our manual. We can go ahead and create one here. Nice, simple, easy left clicks. This is all done in the web browser. You don't need anything fancy and special. No cutting edge computer machine with 9,000 gigs of RAM. You can just run it right on your web browser. You select your material type that you're utilizing there, and then go ahead and click save, and that'll log that information. And then you can adjust it as needed. So depending on whichever screen you're using, whatever you prefer, maybe it's easier to see where the toe is in the DTM versus the photographic image there. Maybe you need both just to verify things. You can make those adjustments, no problem, and it'll reflect on both sides. So the difference too on that polygon that was up at the top is it's not going to require you to go ahead and put a material specification in, so you won't be able to get a tonnage out of it, but you can get a volume out of it. All right. As I like to say, it's all about that base. So just because you can make a polygon doesn't mean you know what's on the bottom of it. So sometimes you'll run into tricky ones, like the stockpile here is kind of on almost like a little bit of a hill or a crest. So we need to go through and pick out how we're going to best do that. So we can visualize this data and take a look at it on how this is being determined on what our cut and our fill is. So we can see here at the toe of the pile, I think I zoom in a little bit more on there so you can see it, but yeah, right around that toe there, it should be down a little bit lower. That's what we would expect. So we can change some of these. We have quite a few different ways that you can adjust the bases and then revisualize that data and information and see what we have. Now our toe in our front has creeped down a little bit more, but it might be a little bit too much in the front. So maybe we want to go ahead and put it on manual. And I like to do manual for some of the different stockpiles that are a little bit irregular, because what I'll do is I'll pick multiple points and basically create a plane there. You can put as many points in as you want. I usually find 3 or 4 points usually works pretty well. Then it'll go ahead and bring up a compass tool that you can make adjustments with. So you can tweak some of that information. You can see what's going to work best, visualize it here. Once you have that done, you can go ahead then and update it, and then you can visualize, see what that looks like. I like to preview it before I finish with the plane and doing my editing. That looks a lot better. I'm getting more of my toe. I'm getting good areas on the side. And then once I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and finish that plane information. Now, if we need to make changes to any of these polygons, we can find it on the map. We can change the name. We can copy it over to another project if we want, and it'll retain that information as well for those specialized planes that we put in. So we can export it out, we can offset the measurement, and most notably and newer one, we can lock those measurements. If you are a big user of the Strayos platform, you also can benefit from that. Design layer is probably the best one as far as the most accurate, because it's going down to a designed layer. Now, I don't have one in here to show, but that would be coming from like a DXF or DWG. And then you can also run comparisons on those two different stockpiles that you may have. Jumping back a little bit to that design layer, that's going to probably be your most accurate because it's a base that everyone has agreed upon, and it's at a set coordinate system that's not being adjusted or there's interpretations being made. Not everybody has design layers. Not everyone's seen the bottom of their site in 30, 40 plus years, or it's just been lost to time or was never captured. If you have the opportunity to capture data and information of your site before stockpiles are there, that's going to probably give you your most accurate base. Load it in as that design layer, and I guarantee you're going to get much better data and information as far as what your inventory actually is. Now, multiple bottoms is a different one that's in Strayos. So this can be utilized then for stripping campaign surveys. Maybe you're looking at your overall pit, you're breaking it out by benches that are there. Really, it's up to the user to specify what they're looking for, but it gives you the chance to visualize your volumetrics and then also pull your volume and information and tonnage that you might be seeing there. So that's something that's done. It's just taken within the area of the polygon. Now, if you recall, I touched upon uploading georeferenced LiDAR. So we can also do this if you are capturing data inside of sheds. Make sure it's georeferenced. You're going to be able to visualize that data in Strayos. It'll pull all that information. In this case, we do have to cut the roof off of the top of this. Looks like probably an RMS shed. And that will then go ahead and render that information for us. We can draw a polygon around what we are determining our area or volume that we're pulling that information from. And then we can start to look at being able to visualize that like we normally would to do our checks on what kind of our cut and fill information is, make sure that that base makes sense. So that is able to be brought in and utilized in Strayos as well. Reports. It's cool making polygons, but it's better when all the reports populate for you. So you can export your report information out when you're done. So you have quite a few different options that you can choose from. You can download it as a PDF, use CSVs, share it with people, mark things up, edit information. All of the images in here are dynamic. You can move them around, make adjustments. Maybe you want it to be a certain way to be able to visualize it and pull that information. Specify all your different material types. You can have it broken out then by the pile that you have, or look at a kind of an overall material summary. So we had multiple mill scale piles here. Now they're all tallied up as one. So that's something that's very handy in the inventory report, pulls all that information, and you can associate as much or as little information as you'd like in there. We also have dashboards. We have quite a few different ways to report things. So on our inventory dashboard, we can specify then our site information that we're looking at. We could look at our overall picture of what we have here. We could even break it down by stockpile, look at dates. This is really going to give you the chance to do deep dives or look at kind of a historical reporting management of it, which we have something as well for the overall stockpiles. Now we also have Strayos analytics as well. This is going to go ahead and get into some of the inventory charts. So again, you're seeing a lot of your stockpiles for your overall site, two different ways to view and utilize that data as well. Pull that information in, we can see we have a nice chart kind of giving us an idea of what we're looking at. We then have a nice table as well. This one's a little overpopulated because we have everything in there. But what I like is we have a burn rate and we also have a forecasted depletion rate. So if you're a cement plant, maybe you're keeping an eye on your coal piles or your coke piles that you're utilizing and consuming. Maybe you're keeping an eye on different clinker piles that are going on and you want to have a better idea of what some of your consumption rates are. This is going to give you that information. Now, it is a forecasted depletion. So the more data and inventory information you start to provide it, the more refined it'll get. But it's going to be going off of the survey information and seeing how it's working together. Stockpile history, that was right next to our report information as well. So this is something that's nice and dynamic. You can review it per stockpile. So we can see some of those different changes that have happened over time for that different stockpile with our dates when our surveys were completed. If we've had different information associated with it, such as a tonnage and a price, that'll also be reflected too as well, and you can review that information. So it's something that's a really handy tool to have in there and be able to quickly take a snapshot if there's a discrepancy on a pile or looking at maybe trends or histories. An additional item that we have in here as well is also a workflow manager and approvals. So you can set up your own customized process management within here. So let's say we wanted to look at stockpile approvals. We can go ahead and make this, and then we start to populate in basically our process that we have. So when the stockpile is created, it gets submitted to the plant manager, and then the employees are the ones who are utilizing that. The plant manager then says either yay or nay, approve or reject, and then where does it go from there? Once if it's approved, then it goes to maybe a divisional manager, or depending on wherever your structure is set up. If you need these permissions, you can go ahead and do that. You'll also then have a overall approval history that you can track as well with that too, to make sure then if there's accountability that needs to be spread around, you have that chance. Or maybe it's being uploaded by a contractor and you want to have better eyes on how things are being done or make it easier to review. So just a few items to keep in mind for your next inventory as you go through this. We kind of went through our first inventory, so to speak, at our site. So we can import and export our stockpile boundaries. This can be extremely helpful if we're doing a separate audit review. Maybe we need to just have an idea of placement. Maybe we're planning on expanding our stockpile yard and we need to look at workflows for where vehicles are going to be moving. We can lock our stockpile boundaries, all of them, one of them, depends on what it is. But if you're doing additional work in there, somebody accidentally doesn't grab it, changes your volumes. Copy the stockpiles to the next project. So once they're made, copy them to the next one. So you're ready to go for your next survey. Make life a lot easier, do the adjustments as needed. We also have an API integration for SAP. So that way you can pull in and push that data and information. That's something that you're interested in right into your SAP for your organization. And then we touched also too upon the workflow approval process. So we'll go ahead and take another poll question, and then we'll be heading towards our segmentation AI.
All right. Jumping now to our third poll question, I'm going to start. And it's which of these workflow improvements would have the biggest impact on your operations? So first, import export stockpile boundaries, API integration with ERP systems, automated approval workflows, lock boundaries to prevent uh, uh, not sure what it's after, I cannot see it, and better reporting dashboard features. Again, I'm going to give around 50 seconds again. So after that, I'm going to publish the results. Okay, this one is interesting. So I'm going to publish now the results. It's not exactly a tie, but are really close. So we have the API integration of ERP systems and the better reporting dashboard features. What's your thoughts on that, James?
There's about 9 different ways to report the volumetrics, and being able to look at those trends and update those information for either the plant manager or controller can certainly be valuable to keep an eye on. So makes sense.
All right.
All
You're going to
right,
add the results now.
excellent. All right, what you've all been waiting for. So this is our new segmentation AI stockpile tool. To go ahead and get into it a little bit more, this is a item where you are actually going to start to get to work and manipulate and play with the AI as it's picking information with a lot of your input. So it's currently located up at the top. It is in our beta, but I have a little bit of exciting news for you on that one too. But all you'll need to do is left click, and then it'll select the stockpile information for you, designate it as a stockpile or a measurement polygon. You can give it a name, choose a material type if it's going to be a stockpile, and then hit convert, and then it'll display the information for you. You can see the color. If you need to remove it, you can do that. Now, as you're in this kind of screen capture here, it's going to go ahead and start to learn. The more that you start to put into it, the better. If you click outside of an area, that's not a problem. Hold down the shift key, left click, and it'll start to remove that. So you can see it's starting to dynamically learn. Instead of having to trace each stockpile or go through it, it's doing a much better job following at the toe. We can see how it's picking up things faster as we start to move along here. It's really reducing the amount of time, clicks, information, interpretation that you're having to make. Now, you'll still be able to go in, do edits, updates to these as well, so that's not a problem. So once we have all of our information, we can click save. We can take a look at it and review it. You can tell also too, the number of nodes that are now around those stockpiles is much more than you would have than doing it manually by yourself. The advantage to that is we now have a tighter base that's following along the toe of that pile. And again, we can make changes to these updates as needed for them. It's not a problem. So that's one of our new tools there. Again, you can make those changes. Let's say if we move it too far out, again, hold down that Alt key, left click, and you can go ahead and remove it. So you're able to make the different revisions that you might need in case it didn't quite go all the way there, or maybe it's not quite interpreting that correctly. So I'm an engineer. I like to say, let's see what we can do. So this is me going through and timing myself doing 29 stockpiles at the site. I did them all manually. Each one of those nodes that you see is a click. I just about broke my left mouse finger clicking that many times, but it was all done. I will say I'm probably a little bit faster at this than your average person. I've been doing stockpiles for like 15 years in software, so I can move pretty hot and heavy through it. Just so we're all on the same page, there were no revisions that I made to any of these. So what you're seeing is kind of raw. I just moved on once I made one. I didn't do any renaming. Whatever the generic name came out in Strayos, I utilized that. I did make a material selection for each one. And we're roughly looking at about 21 seconds per pile going through this. And like I said, I'd probably be faster than most people manually doing it. So, but I wanted to give you guys full taste of real action here so we can know what we're kind of looking at. So then I went through, utilized that with our segmentation AI tool. Again, I held the no revisions. I didn't do any renaming. I let it just stick with it was. One click was one polygon, so that was super nice. I didn't feel like my left mouse finger was going to break off. Material selection took me 6 minutes and 13 seconds. So about 13 seconds per pile. So you're talking roughly about a 40% decrease in the amount of time that it took me to do that. So that's just looking at it from a time, ease of use perspective. But now we start to look at, well, what does it mean when I look at these and overlay them? What am I really starting to get out of this? Well, if I overlay these, we can start to see some distinct differences begin to happen. We can see we have, with the segmentation AI tool, tighter toes that are running around these. We have more nodes that are there, so we're getting a nice tight base off of that. We're probably getting a bit of a higher accuracy as well. It's not quite drifting outside the parameters as it normally would. It's better at following some of the toes. I will say I did run into a little bit of issues around some of the stackers, but I think that's going to be something we've put in some revisions for. But again, we can easily make those adjustments. These have not been touched. They haven't been adjusted. They're just raw from me making it, doing no changes. The other thing I like to point out too is this is version 1.0. As in all things that we've been seeing in the marketplace, from you know Cat GDP to Claude to other items, AI is only getting better the more time it gets. The more that it sees, the more that it starts to interpret and pull in. We're certainly not going to stop at version 1.0. And on that note, we are doing some updates. So here's a little bit of a sneak peek for you on what we're doing with the segmentation AI. So you can see we've made a little bit of a different interface with this, as well as how it captures the information and pulls it in. It's now doing a better job of letting you maneuver in the actual data to look at it and review it. It's doing those segmentations faster. We've uploaded in the back end some additional models and information so it can learn from it, because with any AI system, you do have to kind of continuously feed it and train it data and get it more experiences. So the more it sees, the better it gets, the faster it goes, the easier it is for you. So that will be an update that'll be coming out maybe in the next month or so. So something to keep an eye out for. So we're already heading towards our next version of it. So I'll go ahead and turn it over for I think what might be our last poll question here.
Yes, so for our last poll, I'm just going to start in here. It's what's your biggest barrier to implementing automated slash AI stockpile tracking? So we have the option cost and budget constraints or budget constraints, lack of technical expertise, uncertainty about accuracy or reliability, uncertainty, integration with existing systems, regulatory compliance concerns, and we are ready to implement now. So again, we're going to give about 15 seconds so everyone can vote. This is a really close one. I'm going to share the results soon.
You get me all excited, Jose.
All right, I'm just going to post the results and I'm going to say the three of them. Of course, we have the most voted one, that is uncertainty about accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
There is about 30%, but then we have two that are tied. There is cost or budget constraints and integration with existing systems. So, and I actually just by the end, a fourth one come into this 23%. So it was the one that the people voted the
Huh?
most. Is we are ready to implement now. So we have these four results that people are a little bit more undecisive on this one.
Well, that's good. I figured it would probably be across the board. Surprised it's kind of equally across the board, but that's exciting.
Yeah.
So,
And
so moving to some of my closing thoughts here. I'll give you some recommendations, my idea of what I call as the one-click wonder, and then just to touch upon some high-level kind of ROIs that I normally see that can help start to justify this, put it as different initiatives, things like that, and try to look at it from a couple different angles. So first off, my recommendations when you're doing these different inventories at site and breaking it down into two different kind of buckets here. We have our data capture and fieldwork. So set permanent GCPs at site. If it's your site, you own it, set permanent GCPs. It'll make your life a lot easier. If you have contractors come in, you can give them reliable information that you understand, you know where it is, it's being utilized, and it's starting to work there. Standardize your flight parameters. If it's site, it's not really moving. Stripping surveys are always moving, but we're focusing on like inventory stockpile yards for this go. You can standardize some of your flights. That removes another variable of, well, was it flown at this? Is the GSD different? Is the camera right? You can start to really standardize items. What is your backup survey control? If you're sitting there and you're shrugging your shoulders, well, that might be something you may want to look into. Um, if we can't capture our data how we normally would, what is our secondary method we're going to try to process this data, and we know we can rely on it as far as accuracy? Your survey control is your definition of what you're really getting for your accuracy on the modeled data. Now, you still have your accuracy of your sensors, things like that to take into account, but your modeled data, it really matters what that accuracy is. Fly 10% outside of that AOI. Um, it's just going to give you a little bit of extra images. It's usually not a big deal. I highly recommend it. And 9 times out of 10, somebody shoves a stockpile out there that nobody told anybody about, and you might catch it. So um, if you're able to set up your GPS on known points or establish known points, that kind of goes back to your permanent GCPs at site. You can utilize that. If there's errors or issues, you can usually find it, do some troubleshooting, hunt down where your problem child is and fix it. And you might be able to save your inventory data or at least true it up. It gives you a lot more options to work with. Now, moving to the post processing side, try to be consistent on your polygons. And what I mean by that is utilizing the same tools, copying them over. If, let's say, you have a vertical stacker at your site, maybe it doesn't make sense to follow the toe of the pile. Maybe it would be better to set kind of overall boundaries that are almost like rectangles that are made of your area, so it doesn't matter if it's moving back and forth. Um, if you're able to utilize that design layer in Strayos, it's going to be the most accurate because it's a base that everyone is used to, and it's what normally everybody's agreed to. Of that's what we're going to utilize as a base moving forward. It's geospatially referenced. Everyone's usually happy. It eliminates, well, what if it's here? What if it's that? Does it have a pad on it? Does it not have a pad on it? Did the loader operator dig out the cement pad by accident? All sorts of things can happen at site, but that's going to help you get more standardized. Um, Copy the polygons to the next one. We touched a little bit on that for the consistency, but it's a nice, easy one you can utilize. Maybe the back of the pile hasn't really moved in 2 or 3 years because no one ever gets to it. Keep it the same, right? That's one less variable that you have. And use the DTM. It's going to be just a little bit better for you if there's equipment, material, trees growing out of the stockpiles. So really, these tips are to aim for that repeatability, the consistency, and eliminating those variables. And the other thing to keep in mind too is tech is always moving forward. What it was 1 year ago is not the same now. What it was 10 years ago is not the same. Start to utilize that. Make your life easier. So the other thing people will sometimes visit with me on, and we're gonna ignore budgets for right now and IT departments and everything. Is like, well, should I try to use artificial intelligence? Should I use automation? Um, well, in the great case of Tony Stark from Iron Man, is it too much to ask for both? So, in my opinion, if you're able to put in a UAV dock system that'll automatically do your flights and your data collection, and you can put in those consistent polygons, and you can specify the different times and dates or uh, I basically intervals that you want it to capture data, great. Do that. That makes it easier on your survey team because then they can free them up to go do more valuable projects that are required to have more people kind of doing one-on-one. There's also a safety factor that you can pull into that as well because it's all being automated and it's more looking at the robotic side of the house. Strayos has an API that integrates to that. So once it lands, they'll start processing right in Strayos. You haven't even touched the photos. You haven't had to touch the drone. You haven't had to plan the flights. That's all been done for you when you do your setup. So it'll start to push into the Strayos platform and it'll go ahead and start to do the processing. Then you can go ahead and enable that stockpile AI for the first time, or you can copy in polygons if it's for a re-existing project and utilize that. You can use the segmentation AI tool to do the updates, our nice little one-click make a polygon, automatically run your stockpile reports. If you want to integrate it into your SAP program, you can utilize the APIs with Strayos to push that data and rinse and repeat. So that's kind of the workflow that I envision that you can do. And you can substitute out these different parts as needed, or maybe you just want to take certain things in different steps. these are ideas that you can look at, but it's heading more towards that automation, artificial intelligence, and the goal's not necessarily to pull the human out of the mix. You still need to give it the good old-fashioned logic test, but it's to give you more time to review the information with a critical eye and say, do these decisions make sense? Are these numbers working for us? Are we really tracking what we want to know? Rather than trying to rush through everything, hit everything at the end of the month. Did we get this? The controller needs it. What is sales saying? It's going to help there. So what are we talking about for some different ROIs? This is a little bit high level. You can drill into it, but I find that every site's different on what they're trying to chase. So I took it kind of from 3 different stances, which I'm hoping comprises some of our audience here today. So we have a mine site plant manager, right? Being able to track our burn and depletion rates of different things. That can give you a competitive advantage for looking at your sales. Do you have enough inventory or material on the ground to get that sale? Are you going to be able to meet those contract quotas? You're going to be able to also then really start to utilize that. And that's going to lead to that operational efficiency. And everybody loves audits. They're required. They got to do it. 9 times out of 10, everyone comes up with different numbers and it turns into a good old fashioned debate. If you're able to start to implement some of these consistencies, remove those variables, it can make life a lot easier. And that's going to get you that confidence that you're looking at. Survey consultant, it's about time, right? Time, how many sites can we do a day? What's our turnaround? How can we be consistent? Make sure we're giving good results to the clients. Scalability, right? We got to train people. Can we maximize the time of our personnel so we don't have to look at hiring a whole bunch of people so we can stay lean and mean? With the AI tools, it can also give you a bit of a competitive differentiation compared to some of your others. If you're looking at a corporate regional manager, so you're in charge of multiple sites, maybe you're a regional manager on those items and you're in charge of 8 different sites. Well, it's really hard to look at 8 different reports from 8 different companies or 8 different spreadsheets that are not necessarily uniform. This is going to give you that chance to start to standardize and then be able to compare a lot easier. You're going to get real-time knowledge because of those quicker turnarounds. That's going to give you some audit efficiencies. There will be discrepancies between what the audit says and what you guys are saying internally. There always is. But if you guys can drill into that quicker, that's hours saved back for you. Capital deployment. Maybe we don't need to keep as much material on the ground because we have a lot more confidence in our volumes and what we are getting in more real time because we're doing, let's say, those automated workflows. And then we also have contractor consolidation too. So if you're bringing in different contractors for things, well, maybe you can start to organize a little bit more of that with that standardization and comparability. So things to keep in mind. And of course, when it comes down to the good old fashioned dollar, these inventories are not just volumes, numbers, tonnages. It's money. That is revenue. Mine sites exist to produce, right? There's no other reason to really have them. So those stockpiles, they're dollars sitting there, and we want to make sure we're accurately counting them. So if we took just a 2% increase on our accuracy for, let's say, our 50 stockpiles, and they're comprising of 10,000 cubic yards, you're talking about $3,000 a stockpile at about $15 a cubic yard. That's kind of a low end aggregate price based upon my good old fashioned internet searching. So you're talking about 150K that you have better visibility on. Is it going to give you 150K? Maybe not, but your visibility is something that's really important. If you can't measure it, you're not really managing it. So on that note, thank you for your time and joining us today. I hope you were able to take something away and maybe implement it at your site, have a better idea how to approach it. You can always contact us here at Strayos. We're happy to work with you on any of that as well. But at this point, I want to go ahead and open it up to any questions that you all may have.
Hi, thanks, James. So everyone, feel free to put any question that you have on the Q&A session now. You had got one before. There is from anonymous attendee. That is, do you guys have GCPs available? As an example, right now we use Propeller, and they provide us with aero points for our GCPs.
That's a great question. So we do not have GCPs that are available. We do make recommendations on those. What I normally used as a consultant, I purchased floor tiles off of Amazon, or I would go down to brickyards and kind of install permanent ones. If you have off-spec clinker, you can make a lot of stuff if you're a cement site too. I like them because they're permanent. If you use those arrow points, they're a fantastic piece of equipment, but they're about $1,000 a pop, and you got to go recollect them every time, unless you want to leave them out there and let them get weathered and beat up, which I wouldn't recommend. Unfortunately, at this point, we don't have any integration with arrow points because Propeller and Strayos are different companies, but you can use the arrow points if you have those. You can export out the CSV file after it's been corrected and then utilize that as a checkpoint file or GCPs when you're running it as well. So there's a few options there, but me, I lean towards the 25-cent tiles off Amazon.
Hey, thanks, James. The next one, it's from Monsif. He says, hi, joined right by the end and missed most of the webinar. Could you please share a recording link when it's available? So I think I can answer these ones. Yes, we are going to have a link of this session recorded, and it should be available within 1 business week. So for everyone wondering if you are going to receive, so probably within 1 business week, you should receive a link with the recorded session of this webinar. Okay. So as we wait for some of the people to still put their questions, we did receive some questions before via email. I'm going to just read some of these. One of the questions that I got in here, Jamie, it's what happens if AI misses a stockpile or creates an incorrect boundary?
So that's not a problem. You certainly have a couple different ways that you can manually update those as well that we showed in the software. Also, too, you're able to make any adjustments to those different AI stockpiles by just using your left mouse, clicking and dragging, or if you need to remove nodes, you can just go ahead and hold down the Alt key and left click. It'll knock those out for you. Make the adjustments that you need.
Yeah, that's great. Probably a lot of people were wondering if there would be an issue or not. As you see, it's really easy to fix it. And another one, it would be, what's your recommendation for operations just starting with drone-based stockpile tracking? Should they go straight to AI or start manual?
I would say, if you're starting to get into those different trackings, I mean, certainly keep an eye on what those bases are too. You can draw polygons in a couple different ways, but I'd recommend using the Segmentation AI tool. That's going to let you start to get into it. As you saw in the comparison, does it faster, you get more nodes around the base, it does a tighter job around the toe. That's what I'd lean towards if I were them.
All right. I think we got one more. It's from Monsif that it's, I know most of stockpiles inventory, it's done in summer. Do your AI model takes into consideration snow periods? Because it affects a lot of boundaries.
Yeah, yes. The extra width factor that you get out of that or smoothing that happens with the stockpiles. Right now, I would say that it will probably be able to pull that because it's still looking at the toe information. But as far as if you have, let's say, 4 or 5 inches of snow that's on top of it, then it's going to look at it and treat it as kind of a smooth factor. You may have to apply kind of an offset factor to your volumes to figure that out because realistically, you're probably not going to get a dozer to go do a push on it or something along those lines. You're not going to be able to melt off that snow. So you do have to do something over nothing. Now, maybe you had the stockpile that was done and you were able to copy those polygons over from the summer and you're only mainly pulling from the front face. That would give you some more accurate measurements off that if you're able to bring in and copy those polygons across.
All right, terrific. So those were really great questions. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We just got at the top of the hour. Please, if you still have some questions, feel free to reach out to us directly. We are going to be able to give an answer to those. Again, just to assure you that this webinar is being recorded, so you should receive a copy or a link with this recorded session via email directly. And thank you, James, for your presentation today. And I wish you all a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.